Have you ever felt something in the dark? Something that moves only when you look away? You know, most people think silence is safe, but that's not true. Silence is only the moment when they decide what to do with you. Tonight, before you close your eyes, before you sink into that soft, sleepy darkness, let me take you somewhere you probably should never visit. A place that still remembers the screams it once swallowed. An old psychiatric hospital in rural Ohio. It stands crooked on a hill, like it's trying to hide behind dead trees. Windows broken, walls rotting, and the halls? Eternally hungry. People say the hospital is empty, but I'm going to tell you a secret, whispered softly so it doesn't hear us. It's not empty. It was never empty. It's just patient. And tonight, someone is going to walk inside. Someone who shouldn't. Detective Laura Hayes. She's looking for a missing teenage girl. But what she finds instead is something that sounds like the girl, cries like the girl, begs like the girl, but isn't the girl. So settle in, sink into your pillows, and let your breathing slow down. We're going to drift into a story that listens back. Before we go any deeper, if you enjoy slow, atmospheric, sleep-inducing horror, you might want to subscribe, because these nightmares, well, they tend to return. All right, let's step inside. Picture this, a cold Ohio night. The moon is thin, barely a silver scratch across the sky. Fog stretches across the ground like something crawling, slow and deliberate. Detective Laura Hayes is sitting alone in her car, engine humming softly, headlights off. She's been following the ping of a missing girl's phone, and every time she refreshes the tracker, the location narrows. It points to a place everyone in town avoids. A psychiatric hospital abandoned in the late 1970s after a fire, budget issues, and well, the official report claims structural hazards. Unofficially, patients screamed about shadows that repeated their voices. Doctors reported hearing their own footsteps behind them. And a psychiatrist doctor, Rowan, vanished in the middle of a night shift. But that's old folklore. And Laura doesn't care about folklore. She cares about the missing girl. She steps out of the car. Her boots crunch against dead leaves. The air is so still it feels like the night is holding its breath. The hospital stands in front of her, tall, silent, and incredibly uncomfortably watchful. Great, she mutters. Creepy building in the middle of nowhere. My favorite. A little dry humor to cover her nerves, classic Laura. She walks toward the rusted front entrance, and the moment she places her hand on the door, something inside knocks back. Not loud, not threatening, just one soft, polite knock, like a patient asking for permission to come out. Laura freezes. Okay, she whispers. Nope, that's not normal. But the missing girl's phone is still pinging inside. So she steps in. The door groans open. Cold air spills out carrying a faint smell of antiseptic, wet plaster, and something else. Breath, human breath, or something pretending to be human. Inside, the darkness feels thick, like it has weight. Her flashlight cuts a narrow beam through the dust. The hall stretches left and right, peeling wallpaper. Doors hanging crooked, wheelchairs abandoned like forgotten ghosts. And then a sound, a distant, trembling voice. Help, please! Laura's heart jumps. It's the girl's voice. Hi, panicked, echoing down the hall. Hey, Laura calls out. I'm coming, don't move. But the moment she speaks, her own voice repeats from the opposite direction. I'm coming, don't move. I'm coming, don't move. Layered, broken, out of sync, like fragments of her words bouncing through a long metal tunnel. And then another whisper joins the echoes. Not hers, not the girl's. A third voice, too close, too soft, right behind her ear. Detective, Laura spins around. Her flashlight flickers. There's no one there, just the empty hallway stretching into darkness. She exhales sharply. Okay, loud and clear. This place hates me. The hospital settles. Pipes groan overhead. A door clicks somewhere in the distance. Everything feels awake. Time slows. Her footsteps echo, and then her echoes echo again. Not normal echoes, wrong echoes. Delayed, distorted, like something is catching her sound, holding it, and then throwing it back at her. Laura swallows. Her instincts whisper, turn back. But she repeats her mantra. Find the girl, get out alive. Simple. Yeah, simple. Sure, Laura isn't fearless. People think detectives are. But fear is just a signal, and she's good at ignoring signals. She's been on dozens of missing person cases. Most were straightforward, some were painful, and a few, the ones she doesn't talk about, involve voices where there shouldn't have been voices. But she never believed in ghosts, or spirits, or whatever people claim lives inside old buildings. She believes in facts, evidence, footprints, signals, not whispers in the dark. She brushes dust off her jacket and continues deeper inside. Every step she takes feels like the floor is listening. The hallway branches, left, patient rooms, wide open, beds rusted, sheets stiff with time. Right, the therapy wing. Straight ahead, the administrative offices, including the room where Dr. Rowan once worked. The ping on her phone updates again. The missing girl's devices moving, slowly. Inside the building, Laura's voice drops to a whisper. "Oh, come on, seriously?" She follows the signal. Walls vibrate with faint, unsteady echoes. She hears a soft, dragging sound like bare feet sliding across tile. But when she stops walking, the dragging stops too. Perfect. This place copies footsteps and breathing, a real crowd pleaser. She keeps going, light held high. Her beam catches a series of old paintings on the walls, portraits of doctors from the 1950s and 60s. Eyes faded, faces warped by mold. One name stands out, Dr. Rowan. The brass plaque is tarnished but readable. And for a second, just a second, Laura feels like the painted eyes shift, like they're tracking her. She steps back, rubs her eyelids. Okay, I need coffee, or sleep, or both. But when she turns her head, someone whispers again, "Detective." This time the voice sounds exactly like her mother. Laura stiffens. Her mother died 8 years ago. But the hospital doesn't care about the truth. It cares about what hurts. A breeze moves past her, brushing her neck-cold fingers in passing. Her flashlight flickers again. She mutters, "Can you not?" At the light, the darkness, the entire situation. Dry humor, her last line of defense. She steps into the therapy wing. The air colder there, heavier. A faint whistle drifts through the broken vents. Soft, rhythmic, almost like someone humming a lullaby. A lullaby she knows, one her mother used to sing. She whispers, "Stop it, please stop." But the lullaby continues. Slow, sweet, wrong. The beam of her flashlight sweeps across the room, and she sees movement. A figure standing in the corner. Small, still, facing the wall. A girl, shoulder-length hair, thin arms, bare feet. Laura's breath catches. "Oh my God. Hey, don't worry, I'm here to help." She takes a step forward. The figure trembles, and then the girl's voice echoes from the far left hallway, completely opposite the figure. "Help me, please." Laura freezes. She slowly raises her flashlight, and the figure in the corner slowly turns its head toward her. But the face is blank, smooth, no eyes, no mouth, nothing human, just pale skin stretched over emptiness. Laura stumbles back, heart pounding. "What the?" The blank-faced figure tilts its head a slow, unnatural motion, then collapses into dust like it was never solid. A soft exhale moves through the room. A whisper follows. Echo. The hospital seems to pulse. Laura feels the hair on her arms rise. She's not alone, and she hasn't been alone since the moment she stepped inside. Her radio crackles static at first, then her own voice comes through. "Detective Hayes, hallway 3, come quickly." She doesn't speak. She doesn't touch the radio, but her voice continues. "Come quickly, come quickly, quickly," layering over itself like a broken loop. She grips her flashlight tighter. "Okay," she whispers. "This place needs an exorcist, a bulldozer, and maybe a nuke." But she moves anyway, toward hallway 3, because the ping on her phone, the missing girl's last location, is right there. She walks into the hollow narrow with peeling green paint and shattered lights overhead. The echoes grow louder, voices overlapping. Some hers, some the girl's, some unfamiliar. She hears dozens of people whispering at once, but none of them are alive. The walls vibrate. Her breath fogs the air. At the far end of the corridor, a door slowly swings open, creaking, inviting. And from inside, a faint figure emerges. White coat, tall, calm, Dr. Rowan. Even though he's been dead for decades, he lifts his head slightly, eyes pale and empty. And in a voice that is too calm, too steady, too rehearsed, he says, "Welcome back, detective. We've been expecting your voice." Then the door slams shut. The lights burst overhead, and the hallway erupts with screams, not loud, not human echoes of echoes of echoes. And among those screams, Laura hears her own voice, calling her name, though she hasn't spoken a word. Detective Laura Hayes stood frozen in that narrow hallway as the echoes of her own voice bled through the broken speakers overhead, stretching and warping like someone was pulling her words apart just to see what they were made of. And she whispered to herself, "Yeah, totally normal, absolutely fine." Because sometimes the only thing holding fear together is a thin layer of sarcasm. And she forced her feet to move, even though every part of her felt like the building was inhaling around her, drawing her deeper the way an old lung drags in dust after decades of silence. And as she stepped past the therapy room, she tried not to look inside them, tried not to see the abandoned restraints or the overturned chairs or the cracked observation windows that reflected her flashlight beam. Half a beat too late, as if the reflections were thinking about cooperating before they actually did. And with every slow breath she took, she could swear the air was getting heavier, colder, like this place had its own gravity, pulling thoughts down, slowing the edges of her memory until even her own heartbeat sounded distant. And she whispered, "Focus, Hayes. You're here for the kid." Because grounding herself was the only way to break through the soft, steady hum that followed her down the hall like a low mechanical lullaby. She remembered the missing girl, Emily Rhodes, 16 years old, quiet, smart, the kind of kid who apologized even when she wasn't the one who did anything wrong. A girl who loved photography and somehow ended up sending her last phone signal from this rotting psychiatric hospital, where the walls peeled like old scabs, and every door felt like a mouth waiting to swallow someone smaller. And Laura tried to picture Emily here, alone, scared, stumbling through the dark while the building whispered back her own voice at her. Oh God, how terrified she must have been. And that thought alone made Laura push forward, even when something in her gut begged her to turn back. She moved past the nurse's station where papers were still scattered like someone left in a hurry 40 years ago, and one chart lay open with neat handwriting spelling out the name, Dr. Rowan, and notes about vocal hallucination phenomena and acoustic mimicry, and patients reporting layered voices in unoccupied spaces. And Laura whispered, "Yeah, great, that's comforting," while brushing her thumb over the page. And the moment her skin touched the paper, the overhead lights flickered, and the building made a low, human-sounding sigh deep in the vents, almost like relief, almost like recognition. She kept walking, letting her flashlight skim across water-stained ceilings and rusted bed frames. And as she passed room 214, she heard a small knock inside, 3 soft taps, like someone too polite to be a threat, but too close to be ignored. And she said, "If that's a raccoon, I swear I'm quitting this job," and pushed the door gently with her foot, only to find the room empty, except for an old wheelchair facing the corner, slowly rocking even though there was no draft. And behind her, she heard a faint giggle, high and tiny and not at all like Emily, more like something trying out the sound for the first time, practicing joy because it had never had any. Laura tightened her grip on the flashlight and kept moving, noticing how the deeper she went, the more the hospital seemed to shift around her. Not physically, not like walls moving, but like her sense of direction was being lightly edited, nudged, rearranged. Hallways that should have looped back didn't. Stairwells led to floors that shouldn't exist. And once, when she turned to check her path, she saw her own silhouette standing at the end of the corridor. Same height, same posture, but it didn't hold a flashlight, and it didn't move until she blinked, and then it was gone. She whispered, "Nope, nope, absolutely not." But she still kept going because the phone signal kept pulling her toward the East Wing, the part of the hospital that burned in 1974, the part that officially didn't exist anymore on public records, even though she was clearly walking into it now. And as she crossed the charred threshold, she felt the temperature drop enough that her breath turned into pale ghosts in front of her face, drifting upward like they were trying to escape. The walls here were blackened and split, and the ceiling hung low like it was trying to eavesdrop. And she could feel something watching her from the places the fire had hollowed out. Something patient, something ancient, something that knew her footsteps before she made them. She followed the ping on her phone until it stopped updating, frozen on a single location, room B07, some kind of storage room tucked behind a half-collapsed nurse station. And when she reached the door, she felt a low hum beneath her fingers, like the wood itself had a pulse, and a voice, not Emily's, not hers, whispered from behind the door, "Don't leave me. Please don't leave me." So softly it almost sounded like a memory begging to be let out. Laura steadied her breathing, pushed the door slowly, and stepped inside to find the room nearly empty, except for dust-covered shelves, a cracked mirror leaning against the wall, and a single object in the center of the floor. Emily's phone, screen glowing faintly even though the battery was dead. Laura knelt, reached for it, and the moment her fingers touched the device, the door slammed shut behind her, plunging the room into darkness as something cold exhaled against the back of her neck, and she heard her own voice whisper. But this time it wasn't an echo. It wasn't delayed. It wasn't distorted. This time it whispered with perfect clarity, right against her ear, as if her own mouth were pressed to her skin. "Detective Hayes, why are you in my room?" Detective Laura Hayes didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink as her own voice whispered against the back of her neck, like a cold fingertip tracing the shape of her spine. And she swallowed hard because there's something especially terrifying about hearing yourself ask a question you never asked. And in that dark little room, the silence felt thick enough to chew, and she whispered very slowly, "Yeah, that's not me. Absolutely not me," trying to ground herself the way people do when they're one whisper away from sprinting straight through a wall. And she kept her eyes on Emily's phone lying in her palm as the dead screen flickered like it was trying to wake up, showing fragments of static and what looked like a blurred reflection of the room. Except in the reflection, she wasn't alone. There was a tall shape standing behind her, too tall to be human, too still, too patient, almost like it was waiting for her to notice. And Laura forced herself to inch a little toward the wall, telling the darkness, "Look, I don't know what you are, but I'm not here to redecorate. I just need the girl." Because humor is cheaper than therapy and works about the same in moments like this. But the darkness didn't respond. It just breathed around her. And for a second, she could swear the air tasted metallic, like old blood in wet copper pipes. She lifted her flashlight, clicked it on, and the beam cut the room open just long enough to reveal that nothing, no one, stood behind her. But she still felt the presence there, like a heatless body leaning close. And she pushed the door, finding it wouldn't budge. Not even a little, like the building itself was pressing back with its full weight, telling her she wasn't done yet. Not here, not in room B07. So she scanned the room carefully, whispering, "Emily, if you're here, please answer, or cough, or throw something. I'm not picky." But the only response was a low, vibrating hum that seemed to come from the walls themselves. A hum that grew louder, layering over itself like a choir made of everything the hospital had ever swallowed. Laura stepped toward the cracked mirror because the reflection had shown something she needed to verify, and the floor creaked under her boots like bones shifting in sleep, and she eased herself in front of the mirror's surface, raising the flashlight and bracing herself to see something horrifying. But what she saw wasn't the tall figure. It wasn't her. It wasn't even the room. The mirror showed a long hallway she hadn't walked through, illuminated by old fluorescent lights that flickered like dying fireflies. And standing at the center of that hallway was a young girl with dark hair covering her face, barefoot, shaking, wearing a hospital gown. Emily. She was alive, or something wearing her shape was, and Laura reached her hand toward the mirror, whispering, "Emily, hey, I see you. Stay right there." Even though she knew that wasn't how mirrors worked. But the girl in the reflection looked up slowly, her eyes black, not in a demonic way, not glowing or monstrous, just empty, like grief had hollowed her out and turned her into an echo of herself. And Emily mouthed a single word, "Run!" Laura jolted back, knocking into a shelf that clattered loudly. And suddenly the room felt like it was collapsing in on itself, the hum rising into a shrill chorus of layered voices. Her voice, Emily's voice, and dozens of others, crying, whispering, begging, laughing, all braided together like something was trying to speak through everyone at once. And Laura yelled, "Stop!" But the voices didn't stop. They sharpened. And then, without warning, everything went silent again. Completely silent. The kind of silent where your heartbeat sounds like a fist pounding on a door. Laura's phone vibrated just once, and when she looked down at Emily's phone screen, the reflection was gone, replaced by a map of the hospital with a single blinking dot moving through the east wing. Except Laura wasn't moving, so whatever that dot was, it wasn't her. And as she stared at the screen, she realized the dot was moving straight toward room B07, fast, steady, deliberate, and she whispered, "Oh no, 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 no," and spun toward the door just as a shadow slid under it, long fingers stretching across the floor like spilled ink reaching for her boots, and the dead lights flickered on overhead with a violent pop, revealing the burnt, peeling room in full detail as the doorknob began to turn on its own, slow and intentional, like whoever or whatever was outside wanted her to hear every second of it, and Laura pressed her back against the wall, gripping the flashlight like a weapon as her own voice whispered from the other side of the door, soft and calm and terrifyingly familiar. "Detective Hayes, thank you for finding my way back." Then the door clicked open. Detective Laura Hayes stared at the slowly opening door, the way someone stares at the edge of a cliff, knowing one wrong move means falling into something they can't climb back out of. And the moment the gap widened just enough for darkness to pour in like a slow-moving fog, she whispered under her breath, "Yeah, this is definitely above my pay grade," because humor was the only thing she had left that wasn't trembling. The temperature dropped so sharply her breath curled in front of her, like tiny ghosts trying to escape first, and the doorknob kept turning even after the door was fully open, continuing to twist slowly, unnaturally, like an invisible hand was still clinging to it, unwilling to let go. Laura held her flashlight up and said, "Look, if you're here to kill me, just do it fast, okay? I didn't stretch tonight." But the darkness didn't care. It just waited, thick and patient, until something stepped into the doorway. Not a person, not exactly a shadow either, but a tall, thin shape that looked like the outline of a man drawn in charcoal, and the edges of him flickered like burnt paper trying to hold itself together. And Laura whispered, "Dr. Rowan?" even though she didn't want the answer. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. It just tilted its head in the same slow, mechanical way that blank-faced echo figure had earlier. But this time she felt the movement inside her skull, like her thoughts shifted to match the tilt, and suddenly the room felt too tight, too loud, too full of someone else's memories. Then a voice, her voice, spoke from the shape, soft and warm and calm, almost affectionate. "You followed my voice all the way here, just like the others." And Laura's stomach dropped because the words hit her with a truth she hadn't allowed herself to consider yet. She wasn't the first detective to search this building, not by a long shot, and maybe none of them ever made it out. She tried to step back, but the shelves pressed against her spine, leaving her nowhere to go, and the figure stepped into the room, its movements smooth and thoughtful, like it was studying her the way a scientist studies an experiment that's finally behaving correctly. "You shouldn't exist," she whispered, and the figure laughed, her laugh, light, sarcastic, almost bored, the sound of her own voice mocking her from a body that wasn't hers, and it said, "I exist because you speak," as if her presence fueled it, fed it, shaped it. The walls trembled softly, like the building was breathing with the figure, and Laura whispered, "Where's Emily? What did you do to her?" But the figure didn't answer. It just walked past her and lowered itself to the floor, placing a charcoal-like hand onto the burnt tiles, and the ground beneath its touch rippled like liquid, spreading into a wide, dark stain that slowly crawled across the floor in Laura's direction. She jumped to the side, heart hammering, and the liquid shadow seemed amused, changing direction as if it could smell her fear, and she muttered, "Fantastic. The floor's alive now. Great. Love that for me," then forced herself to run past the figure out the door before the shadow pool touched her boot. The hallway outside was shaking with whispering voices. Hers, Emily's, dozens of others, murmuring nonsense syllables that sounded like they were unraveling into static, and she sprinted toward the main corridor. But the hallways weren't the same anymore. They twisted, elongated, doors vanished where she swore they existed minutes ago, and she realized the hospital wasn't just echoing voices. It was echoing memories, rearranging itself based on every fear she tried to bury. She turned a corner and found herself standing in front of a massive mural she hadn't seen before, painted across an entire wall, a depiction of faceless patients sitting in a circle while a tall doctor stood in the center with a clipboard. And the doctor had no eyes, no mouth, no features, just darkness where a face should be, and beneath the mural a brass plaque read, Echo Therapy Wing Doctor, Rowan. Laura felt her pulse spike because she knew, deep in her bones, that this wing never existed. Not physically, not historically, but it existed now because the building wanted it to. A low voice whispered behind her ear, "Do you see now?" And she spun around just as the wall to her right cracked open, splitting from ceiling to floor, revealing a narrow passageway that pulsed with faint blue light, like veins glowing beneath skin. Emily's voice echoed down the passage. "Detective, hurry!" Except the voice wasn't scared this time. It sounded steady, controlled, almost coaxing. "That doesn't sound like a kid in danger," Laura muttered. But she stepped inside anyway because every instinct she had screamed that whatever waited at the end was the truth she'd been circling since she walked through the hospital doors. The blue glow grew brighter the deeper she walked until it lit the walls in shimmering waves. And she realized the light wasn't coming from bulbs. There were no fixtures at all. It was leaking from the seams between the tiles, as if the hospital's bones were glowing from within. The passage opened into a large chamber with a collapsed ceiling, moonlight spilling through broken beams like a spotlight, and in the center of the room stood the real Emily, pale, shaking, barefoot, clutching her arms to her chest as if she was freezing from the inside out. "Emily," Laura whispered softly, stepping forward. "I'm here. I'm gonna get you out." But Emily lifted her face, tears streaming, and whispered, "You came too late. He already used me." And she pointed behind Laura. Laura turned slowly, flashlight trembling in her hand, and saw Dr. Rowan emerging from the shadows. But now he had a face. Her face. Not an echo of it. Her actual features, copied perfectly, smiling softly in a way she never had in her life. And he whispered in her voice, "Thank you for giving me the rest," before his body split at the center like smoke peeling in two, revealing hundreds of whispering mouths beneath the surface, all of them speaking with Laura's voice. And Emily screamed as the chamber doors slammed shut, trapping them both inside. I kept walking down that impossible hallway, telling myself it was just my nerves talking, even though at that point I think my nerves had filed an official complaint and left the building, and the air felt heavier with every step, like the house was slowly inhaling and didn't want to exhale until I crossed some invisible line. And of course, because everything that night seemed to have a sense of comedic timing that I really didn't appreciate, the lights above me started flickering. Not in that dramatic movie way, but in that depressing, your power bill is overdue kind of way. Except the electricity was fine, which almost made it worse because at least overdue bills are normal, while hallways stretching like taffy and lights stuttering like they're nervous too, well, that's a whole other conversation. And when I finally reached the end of that hallway, or whatever end meant in that place, I found an old wooden door that didn't match anything else in the house, like someone had just taken it from a different century and nailed it there out of spite. And the strange thing was that I could hear something faint on the other side. Not a voice exactly, but something like a soft shuffling, like someone pacing in small circles. And I don't know why, but I felt like whoever or whatever was behind that door was waiting specifically for me. Like they had been waiting for a very, very long time. And every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around, go home, maybe change my name, move to a different state, never speak of this again. But at the same time, there was this weird calm settling over me, almost like the quiet before a storm hits. And my hand reached for the door even though I hadn't actually made the decision to touch it yet. And the second my fingers brushed the wood, the sound behind it stopped completely, instantly, unnaturally, like someone had pressed pause on a living thing, and a cold whisper slid through the cracks. Not in English, not in any language I recognized, but the tone was unmistakably urgent, like it was warning me or rushing to tell me something before I opened that door. And I swear on my worst decisions, the wood under my hand pulsed, as if something on the other side had pressed its palm against the same spot. And right then, before I could pull away or decide if I was actually losing my mind, the old wooden door unlatched itself with a slow click, swung open about an inch, just enough for the darkness inside to spill out like smoke. And there, in that thin sliver of black, two pale eyes blinked open at my eye level, not glowing, not threatening, just watching me with this unsettling familiarity. as if they recognized me, as if they'd been waiting to see my face again after a long time apart. And just when I thought that was the worst moment of my life, those eyes, without moving any closer, whispered in a clear human voice I knew instantly but couldn't place, "You're late," before the door flew open on its own and the darkness swallowed everything, including, and I think, the part of me that still believed I'd make it out of this house before learning who or what just spoke to me. Have you ever felt something in the dark that shouldn't be there? No rush to answer. Just hold that question for a moment. Because Jason Miller, he was about to learn exactly what that feeling tastes like. It was a little after 12:47 a.m., the kind of Chicago night that feels like someone left the city on mute, snow drifting sideways, streetlights buzzing like they're tired, the whole world strangely hollow, and Jason, 20 years old, sleep-deprived, headphones around his neck, was jogging toward the last bus heading out of the city, Route 94, or at least that's what he thought. He wasn't supposed to be there, but you know how life works. Wrong timing, wrong stop, wrong bus, and then suddenly you're in a story that doesn't let people return the same. Jason's breath steamed in the cold as the bus squealed to a stop. Its headlights flickered, and the front door opened with a long, irritated hiss, like the bus itself was annoyed he had found it. Inside, the light was dim, almost smoky, too warm, too quiet. Jason stepped up, fumbling for his fare card, and that's when he first noticed the driver. An older man, tall but slouched, jaw sharp, eyes strangely calm, too calm, like he already knew Jason, like he'd been waiting. The driver tilted his head and murmured, in a gravelly voice that sounded like it came from deeper than his lungs, "Son, you shouldn't have boarded this one." Jason froze halfway through tapping his card. Sorry? Sue thought this was 94. The driver smiled. Not wide, not pleasant. More like a slow, tired stretch of skin that didn't quite match the moment. "You thought wrong," the man whispered. Jason's fingers hovered over the card reader. His mind said back up, but his body said, "Don't make it awkward," because he was that kind of polite, socially anxious college kid who could be chased by a demon and still say, "Sorry, my bad." "Look, man," he mumbled, "I just need to get near Oakline. If this goes that way." "It doesn't," the driver said, but he didn't sound angry. He just sounded resigned. Jason almost stepped back down, almost, but then he saw something strange. Way in the back row, the silhouettes of passengers, 4, maybe 5 shapes, sitting perfectly still, and yet none of them had faces. At first, Jason assumed it was the lighting, or the distance, or maybe they were turned away. But when the bus hit a streetlight outside, the glow slid over their heads like a hand wiping across glass. And no features, no eyes, no nose, just smooth, pale skin stretched where a face should be. Jason blinked hard, then blinked again. His brain tried to rationalize it. Masks? Shadow? Maybe he's just tired. But something inside him whispered, quiet but sharp, Don't stay here." He nearly listened, but the driver just sighed and tapped the metal dashboard with a knuckle. "Either step in or step off. Door closes once." Jason swallowed and stepped in, because he was young, because he was tired, because the night felt unreal enough that maybe nothing bad would actually happen, and because the world wasn't done with him yet. The door hissed closed behind him. It sounded too final, too heavy, almost like a vault ceiling. "Why?" Jason walked down the aisle, trying not to stare too long at the faceless passengers. His legs felt stiff. The bus's old heater coughed warm, stale air that smelled faintly like rust and something sweet, like old hospital corridors. He took a seat in the middle row, kept his bag on his lap, and tried to blend into the silence. The bus pulled away from the curb, and for the first few minutes, nothing happened. Just the hum of the engine, the occasional flickering light, the city passing by like it was falling asleep mid-sentence. Jason exhaled. "See?" he whispered to himself. "Just a weird driver. That's it." But the thing about horror is, it doesn't slam the door first. It whispers. It waits. It lets you settle, just enough that you don't notice when the world starts bending. A few minutes later, Jason noticed something odd. The streets outside looked wrong. The city lights thinned out too quickly. The familiar storefronts blurred into long stretches of abandoned buildings. The bus turned onto a road he didn't recognize. No traffic, no pedestrians, No signs. Then, the snow stopped falling. Completely. Mid-air, Jason leaned closer to the window. A single flake hovered outside, stuck in place like someone froze time mid-sneeze. What? He blinked again harder. Another flake, and another. All suspended, not moving. Like the world outside was just a painted backdrop. Jason sat back slowly. Okay, that didn't make sense. He glanced around. The faceless passengers remained perfectly still. One twisted slightly toward him, not turning, no head movement, just a subtle shift of their smooth, blank face, angling in his direction. Jason inhaled sharply. He considered changing seats. He considered getting up altogether. But before he could do anything, the lights flickered again. This time they didn't come back fully. Only a cold, sickly yellow glow remained, as if the bulbs were dying one by one. Jason tightened his grip on his backpack. He leaned forward slightly and whispered, "Excuse me. Hey, sir?" The bus driver didn't react. Jason tried again. "Where's this bus going? This isn't 94? Still nothing." But then, a voice, soft, low, too close, whispered from the seat behind him, "Lost route, 17. Jason froze. He turned around slowly, so slowly he could feel every second stretch across his spine. The faceless passenger behind him still had no features, just smooth skin staring straight ahead, unmoving. Jason's heart thudded. "That wasn't you," he murmured under his breath, and yet he had heard it, from right there. Lost Route 17, a name he'd heard once before. A ghost bus story. An urban legend whispered around Chicago campuses about a route that vanished decades ago. The kind of story drunk freshmen told each other to sound brave in the dorm hallways. A bus that picked up the wrong passengers. A route that appeared only after midnight. A road that didn't exist on maps. And whoever boarded it was never seen again. Jason felt a shiver crawl down his back. He leaned back and whispered to himself, No, that's not real. Just an old story. Not real." But the bus slowed suddenly. Not stopped, not turned. Slowed, as if something outside was watching. Jason looked out the window again. The buildings were gone. Trees replaced them. Dark, leafless, skeletal. A forest that did not exist anywhere near Chicago. Branches twisted toward the bus like fingers trying to pull it off the road. The headlights illuminated a narrow road ahead. Cracked, broken, swallowed by fog. The old bus creaked as it rolled deeper in. Jason's breathing grew shallow. He reached for his phone. No signal. Screen flickering. Of course. He looked forward again, straight at the reflection in the mirror above the driver, and froze. Because in the reflection, the driver had no face. Smooth skin, just like the others. Jason's mind blanked for a full second. His stomach dropped. His vision tightened. He felt cold all over, yet a strange warmth crept up his neck, like someone was standing right behind him, breathing. He didn't turn, not at first, but the whisper came again. Soft, too soft. "You shouldn't have boarded this one." Jason whipped around, nothing. Just the faceless passengers. Still, quiet, listening. He stood abruptly, gripping the pole next to him. "Driver!" he shouted. "Stop the bus!" The driver didn't respond. The forest outside grew thicker, closing in like a jaw. Jason stumbled forward, making his way toward the front, ignoring the way the faceless passengers turned ever so slightly, each of their blank heads tilting as he passed. When he reached the driver, he grabbed the metal rail. "Hey, sir, where are we going?" The driver finally spoke, but his voice wasn't the same. It was lower, heavier, layered, like more than one voice speaking at once. "Home." Jason stepped back. "What do you mean, home? This isn't my stop." The driver's head twisted, not turned, twisted, toward Jason, the skin stretching unnaturally. "It is now." Jason stumbled, grabbing for the seat behind him. The bus shuddered as it hit a deeper part of the cracked road. Lights dimmer, fog thicker, forest closing around them. Jason backed away slowly, and that's when he saw it, his reflection in the window. The outline of his face looked wrong, smoother, as if the features were softening, melting. Jason inhaled sharply and touched his cheek. It felt normal, but the reflection, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin. Jason staggered backward, shaking his head violently. No, this isn't real." But the bus slowed again, and on the side of the fog-covered road stood shapes, human shapes, still, watching, faceless. The bus doors hissed open, not because they should, but because something outside wanted them open. Cold air swept in, carrying the faint metallic scent of something old, something forgotten. Jason backed into the aisle, looking from the open door to the faceless passengers who were now rising from their seats, slowly, in perfect unison, all turning toward him. And one by one they whispered, not from mouths but from the air around them. Lost route, 17. Stay, become. Jason's pulse hammered in his ears. His vision blurred. He could feel the warmth on his face again, like invisible fingers brushing against his skin. He stumbled backward, nearly falling. The driver gripped the wheel, leaned slightly toward him, and whispered, "Your face doesn't belong to you anymore, son. The route keeps what it touches." Jason ran. Didn't think, didn't look back. He sprinted down the aisle, past the faceless passengers, past the flickering lights, and dove out of the open door just as the bus lurched forward. His body hit the cold ground, hard. He scrambled up and turned, and the bus was already disappearing into the fog. Not driving away, disappearing, as if swallowed whole. The red tail lights glowed faintly, then faded like dying embers. Jason stood there, chest heaving, freezing air burning his lungs. Silence, forest, fog, nothing else. He touched his face again, still there, still normal. But when he looked down at a small puddle near his shoe, the reflection staring back at him had no face. And part one ends here. A breath held, a moment suspended, a story nowhere close to done. Jason stood there in the frozen air, trying to convince himself that the puddle wasn't showing what it was clearly showing, that his reflection wasn't some faceless echo staring back up at him. And he kept whispering, "Nope, nope, absolutely not," like he could bully reality into behaving. But the forest around him didn't care. It just breathed cold fog across the cracked road, as if it had been waiting for someone exactly like him to slip through the seams of the city and wander into its abandoned little nightmare. And while he tried wiping the puddle with his sleeve, as if that would magically scrub his features back into his reflection, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Partly from the cold, but mostly from the very specific kind of panic that comes when you know you've seen something you were never supposed to see. And honestly, he felt stupid for even hoping a bus could be that weird without consequences. Because really, who ignores a driver saying, "You shouldn't have boarded this one"? Like that isn't the most obvious red flag in the universe. But Jason had boarded anyway because he was tired and broke and too polite to turn around. And now the world felt wrong, like he'd walked off the map and slipped into a forgotten margin where the rules were written by something old and unseen. And the forest around him wasn't helping with its bent trees and twisted branches that leaned just a little too close, as if listening, as if curious, while the air itself felt stale, dense, almost sweet like old antiseptic drifting from some shut-down hospital ward. And Jason's mind kept flashing back to the faceless figures on the bus, how they moved in unison, how they whispered without mouths, how one of them leaned just slightly toward him as he ran, and he shivered because now he wasn't sure if they stayed on the bus or if they'd somehow stepped into the fog with him, hiding somewhere between the dark trunks where the mist thickened into shapes if he stared too long. And he kept repeating to himself that he needed to stay calm, that panicking never helped anyone, though it was pretty hard not to panic when the snowflakes were still hanging motionless in the air like pieces of a broken screensaver, frozen inches from his face. And he stared at them for a long moment, feeling a weird heaviness behind his eyes, like pressure building, like someone gently pressing two fingers against his temples. And he whispered, okay, Jason, this is either a dream, a hallucination, or the universe is playing some really unfunny cosmic prank." But even he didn't believe himself, because the cold biting into his fingers felt too real, and the silence felt too deep, thick, like sound itself was being swallowed before it could travel. And when he started walking, very slowly, carefully, because the ground looked strange, like old asphalt trying to remember how to exist, each footstep landed with a muted thud that didn't echo, didn't trail, didn't behave like normal sound at all. And the longer he walked, the more he realized the forest wasn't actually silent. It was breathing, a low rhythmic sigh hiding under the fog, so faint he thought he imagined it until he stopped. kept moving, and the breath didn't, and for a second he whispered, "Anyone there?" Purely out of habit and social anxiety, because apparently even supernatural horror couldn't override his default politeness. But immediately he regretted it, because something shifted deeper in the trees, like a shape adjusting its weight. And Jason took a careful step back, whispering a soft, "Nope," to no one in particular. And then he noticed a faint glow far ahead, just a small pool of orange light flickering between the crooked branches. And it looked suspiciously like a street lamp, old and rusted, the kind you'd see outside rundown motels or forgotten bus stops. And honestly, he wasn't thrilled about going toward it. But the forest wasn't giving him any other options, so he approached slowly, feeling gravel crunch under his shoes, until the fog parted just enough to reveal a small clearing with a bus stop sign that looked decades old, the paint peeling, the metal dented, and right beside it stood a wooden bench with frost on the edges. And at first Jason felt relieved. Civilization finally. But then he noticed the sign hanging crooked above him, a metal plate with faded lettering that read, "Route 17, last run," and his stomach sank, because if he hadn't seen enough weirdness tonight, now he was apparently waiting at a bus stop for the same cursed route he just escaped. And as he whispered, "You've got to be kidding me," the frozen snowflakes around him began to move again, not falling naturally, but drifting backward, upward, like time was reversing in slow motion, and the air grew strangely warm around his face, like invisible hands brushing over his skin again, checking, feeling, almost sculpting. And Jason stumbled away from the sign just as the old street lamp flickered violently, then steadied, then flickered again in a slow, deliberate rhythm that felt less like an electrical problem and more like a signal. And from the corner of his eye, he saw something move across the road, a pale shape gliding between the trees, smooth and silent, and he refused to look directly at it because he knew, deep in the instinctual, primal part of his brain, that looking would make everything worse. But then he heard the bus stop, bench creak beside him, as if someone had just sat down, the wood groaning under a weight he couldn't see, and he froze, every muscle tight, heart pounding in his throat, staring forward because his nerves wouldn't let him turn. And then, slowly, carefully, he forced himself to glance sideways, and there on the bench, the frost was melting, a human-shaped warmth sinking into the wood, an invisible outline sitting inches from where he had been standing, and a soft whisper drifted into his ear. "Too close, too cold. You ran, but you didn't get far." Jason stumbled backward, tripped, fell hard onto the cracking pavement, and as he scrambled up, breath sharp, eyes wide, he finally heard it, the distant rumble of an engine, familiar, low, heavy, approaching through the fog even though the road looked too broken for anything to drive, and the forest seemed to lean in, the fog thickening around the clearing as twin headlights flickered to life far down the road, growing brighter, closer, and Jason whispered, terrified, "No, no, 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 not again." But the road beneath him trembled like it recognized him, like it had been waiting, and the faceless passengers began to appear one by one at the edge of the trees, standing still, perfectly still, silhouettes gathering silently as the ghostly bus approached, and Jason turned to run, to flee into the woods, anywhere, anywhere at all, only to hear another whisper behind him, this one deeper, layered, unmistakably familiar. "Your stop isn't over yet, son." And when he spun around, breath trapped in his throat, he realized the bus driver was standing right behind him. But this time, he had Jason's face. Jason froze because there are moments in life where your mind just stops, like someone pulled the plug on your thoughts, and seeing the bus driver wearing his face was one of those moments. And for a second, he couldn't even breathe, couldn't look away, because the face staring back at him wasn't just a copy. It was unnervingly perfect. Every tiny freckle, every tired line under the eyes, even the faint scar on the eyebrow he got from drunkenly walking into a dorm door freshman year. And the driver, his driver, tilted that borrowed head in a slow, unnatural angle, as if testing how a human expression was supposed to work, smiling with Jason's mouth, but without any warmth behind the eyes. And Jason whispered a soft, terrified, "Nope," because honestly, that was the only vocabulary left in his brain. But the forest seemed to lean closer, the fog curling in like a living thing, hungry and curious. as the headlights of the approaching bus grew brighter through the haze, illuminating the road that looked like it had been abandoned before the city even existed. And Jason stepped back, heart pounding so loudly he could feel it in his teeth. And the driver stepped forward in perfect sync, like a mirror refusing to let its reflection escape, whispering in Jason's exact voice, "You don't understand. You already left your face behind." And Jason felt something cold crawl over his skin, like invisible fingertips dragging across his cheeks. And panic finally kicked him hard enough that he turned and actually ran down the cracked road into the fog. No plan, no direction, just raw survival instinct telling him to move before something claimed the rest of him. And as he sprinted, the forest blurred on either side, trees warping into thin, tall silhouettes that seemed to stretch higher with every step he took, as if the entire place was growing, shifting, rearranging itself around him. And the road under his feet kept changing texture, gravel to dirt to asphalt to something that felt almost like old linoleum, sticky and uneven, like the floors of the abandoned asylum he'd once explored with friends on a dare. Except tonight there was no laughter, no group, just him and a path that seemed to rewrite itself, pulling him somewhere deeper, somewhere older. And he whispered, "Please, please, not again," because the air behind him carried the unmistakable groan of bus brakes, slow, dragging, like metal waking from a long sleep. And he didn't dare look back, but he could feel the heat of the headlights on his shoulders, feel the rumble beneath the ground matching his heartbeat, growing louder, closer, like the bus wasn't driving on the road but through it, rising from underneath. And then something snapped sharply in the trees to his right, not like a branch breaking, but like a knuckle cracking right beside his ear. And Jason stumbled to a halt, panting, listening, trying to figure out if it was an animal or something far worse. And a second later, he realized the sound wasn't coming from the trees at all. It was coming from above. And when he looked up, breath caught halfway in his throat, he saw faint, pale, human-like shapes clinging to the branches. Dozens of them, faceless bodies crouched like starving birds, heads tilting in unnatural, jerky movements as they watched him from the canopy. And one of them, just one, began lowering itself upside down, its limbs bending like they had too many joints, reaching toward him with long fingers that twitched at the air like they could already feel his skin. And Jason scrambled backward, nearly slipping, whispering, "Nope, nope, nope, nope." But the shapes in the branches followed him, shifting in perfect silent harmony, like a swarm of faceless sentinels, tracking him across the clearing. And the moment he stepped away from the tree line, the forest exhaled, all at once a low, mournful sigh that felt almost disappointed, and the fog thickened around his ankles, as if urging him towards something else, something waiting. And when he turned, hoping desperately to find an exit, he instead found himself staring at a long, dark stretch of highway that hadn't been there seconds earlier, a road that hummed faintly, like it remembered engines that hadn't passed in decades. And at the far end of that highway was a dim neon sign buzzing weakly through the haze, flickering blue and red like a failing heartbeat, spelling out the words, "Midnight Rest Motel," some letters dead, others barely holding on, as if the place itself was too tired to pretend anymore. And Jason whispered, "Oh great, we've unlocked the creepy motel level," because of course his brain would choose sarcasm at a time like this. But his legs moved anyway, pulling him toward the sign because anything, absolutely anything, felt safer than the forest of faceless watchers above him. And as he walked, the fog parted slowly, revealing the motel, old water-stained brick, flickering hallway lights, the kind of place that looked like it rented rooms by the hour and buried problems behind the dumpster. And yet something about it felt strangely familiar, like he'd seen it in a dream, or maybe in the reflection of a window when he wasn't paying attention. And he stepped onto the cracked parking lot just as the neon sign buzzed louder, brighter, then dimmed, like it recognized him, and the air shifted, carrying a faint hum, the sound of distant voices, layered, whispering just out of earshot. And the front office door creaked open slowly by itself, like an invitation, or maybe a warning pretending to be an invitation. And Jason approached the doorway, drawn by something he couldn't name, something pulling at the edges of his mind. And when he stepped inside, the smell hit him first. Dust, old carpets, and a faint chemical sweetness that made his stomach twist. And the lobby lights flickered to life, weak and yellow, illuminating a reception desk with an old bell and a dusty guest book left open as if someone had been expecting him. And as Jason leaned closer, he saw fresh handwriting on the page, handwriting that looked disturbingly like his own, spelling out, "Checked in, Jason Miller," followed by a timestamp that matched the exact moment he stepped into the motel. And before he could even whisper a reaction, the bell on the desk rang by itself, a single loud chime echoing through the empty building, and a voice behind him, soft, warm, almost relieved, said, "Took you long enough." And when Jason turned around, every hair on his body lifted, because standing in the lobby doorway was someone who looked exactly like him. Not the faceless version, not the borrowed face version. This one was perfect, breathing, blinking, alive, wearing his clothes, his backpack, even his broken headphone strap. And the double smiled with Jason's real smile and said in Jason's real voice, "I've been waiting for you to catch up. We can't check out until we're both here." Jason didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe for a full second as he stared at the version of himself standing in the motel lobby doorway. Because there are certain things the human brain refuses to file under normal, and meeting your own perfect duplicate, alive, calm, softly smiling like he'd just beaten you to your own life, was one of them. And the duplicate tilted his head a little, that same small unconscious gesture Jason always did when he was trying to look friendly but actually felt deeply uncomfortable inside. And hearing it come from someone else's body made his stomach twist. And the duplicate said, "Come on, man, you look like you've seen a ghost," which honestly felt like an understatement given Jason had seen a faceless bus driver, floating snowflakes, upside-down forest creatures, and now his own personal horror movie twin checking into a motel that shouldn't exist. And Jason whispered, "What are you?" Because who didn't feel accurate anymore. And the double gave a soft laugh, his laugh, the exact breathy exhale he made when trying to look chill, and said, "I'm you, or at least the you this place remembers." And he stepped forward with such quiet footsteps that Jason didn't hear the floor creak once. And that was wrong, because Jason knew exactly how those old floorboards should sound under his weight. And the duplicate smiled at the confusion on his face, adding, "Guess you figured out the rules by now. This place doesn't like anything fading. It copies things, holds on to them, even you." And Jason backed up automatically, hitting the reception desk, trying to keep calm even though his chest felt tight and his vision wavered like the air around him was heating up, and he could hear faint whispers again, coming from the walls, from the cracks in the ceiling, from the floor beneath the carpet, as if the building itself was alive and paying attention. And he muttered, "I didn't sign up for any of this," to which his double chuckled softly, "You did, when you boarded that bus." And Jason rubbed his face with trembling hands, whispering, "That bus wasn't even supposed to be there." And the double shrugged, "Neither were you." And that answer somehow made everything worse, because the more he stared at this other him, the more he realized small details that didn't match. His double didn't blink quite right, didn't shift his weight naturally, almost like he was remembering how to be human one step at a time. And then the lights overhead flickered violently, turning the lobby into a jittery slideshow of shadows and half-lit shapes. And Jason flinched as a loud mechanical groan echoed through the floor, the same low metallic rumble he'd heard from the ghostly bus engine. And before he could ask anything else, the entire room lurched sideways, just slightly, like the building itself took a shallow breath, and dust drifted from the ceiling in a slow, graceful fall. And Jason whispered, "What was that?" But his double didn't answer. He just stared at Jason with unnervingly bright eyes, too bright, like they were reflecting headlights that weren't in the room. And slowly he raised a hand, pointing behind Jason, and murmured, "You should probably turn around now." And every instinct in Jason's body screamed not to, but sometimes curiosity is louder than a survival. So he turned, very slowly, and saw that the entrance door to the motel lobby was no longer a door at all, but a wide, dark tunnel stretching into a corridor that hadn't been there seconds ago, with peeling wallpaper slouching off the walls and flickering orange lights blinking in a slow rhythm, like a heartbeat. And the whispers grew louder, forming broken words that twisted around his ankles like smoke, urging him forward, calling him, remembering him, and Jason stepped back, hitting the desk again, whispering, "I don't belong here." And his double suddenly appeared right next to him, too fast, too quiet, whispering in his ear, "You do now." And Jason shoved him away on instinct, except his hands passed straight through, like pushing smoke with shape, and his stomach dropped because for the first time he realized the duplicate wasn't standing on the floor at all. He was hovering an inch above it, toes barely brushing reality, and Jason stumbled back as the duplicate steadied himself, more solid now, murmuring, "It's okay, that part takes time. You'll get used to it." And Jason whispered, "Used to what?" Voice cracking, and the duplicate gave him a sympathetic tilt of the head and said softly, "Letting go of the body." And before Jason could react, a loud honking roar shook the lobby windows. Bus brakes, unmistakable, impossibly close, and the neon motel sign outside blazed bright through the fog as headlights blasted across the wall, casting two long shadows. Jason, and a second Jason behind him, taller, distorted, wrong, stretching unnaturally long like it was reaching for the ceiling, and the duplicate whispered, "It found us," just as the motel floor trembled violently, the walls cracking open as a rumbling engine pushed closer, the sound vibrating through Jason's bones, and he turned toward the front window and saw it, the bus, the same haunted steel monster, materializing out of the fog and driving straight toward the motel. Headlights locked on him like prey, and before he could run, could scream, could breathe, the duplicate grabbed his wrist, not smoke now but ice-cold skin, and whispered, "If you don't choose, it chooses for you." The glass shattered inward, the bus horn blared, the lights swallowed the room, and Jason disappeared into the white glare just as a third version of him stepped quietly out of the shadows behind the desk, smiling. Jason hit the ground hard, or at least he thought it was the ground, because when the white glare finally thinned into something he could actually see through, he realized he wasn't lying on a solid floor so much as a pale, shifting surface that felt strangely warm, almost like skin stretched over something breathing underneath. And he pushed himself up slowly, trying not to think too hard about that part, blinking through the leftover after image of the bus headlights, wondering for a second if maybe, just maybe, he died and this was the world's weirdest afterlife orientation lobby. But the air around him smelled like old dust and engine oil, like the inside of a bus that hadn't been cleaned since the 70s. And he heard the faint hiss of doors opening somewhere behind him, followed by a long, low exhale, like a tired machine trying its best to sound alive. And when he turned around, he saw the bus parked crookedly on the shifting white ground, its windows fogged from the inside and its headlights dim now, pulsing with a slow, sickly rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. And Jason muttered, "Yeah, that tracks. Of course we're doing this in a void now," trying to keep some humor in his voice even though his whole body was trembling, because nothing about this place made sense. Not the sky that had no color, not the horizon that wasn't a horizon but a soft blur, not the faint sound of whispers drifting through the air like someone speaking underwater, and especially not the three shadows lying across the ground beside him, all shaped like him, but stretched in different directions, one short, one tall, one just slightly too thin to be human. And Jason whispered, "Okay, that's new," right as the bus door creaked open with a dragging sound that made his teeth itch, and he felt something cold brush the back of his neck. A breeze or a warning, he couldn't tell. And the first version of his duplicate stepped through the bus doorway. The one who had spoken like him, smiled like him, but moved like someone wearing his skin for practice. And this version looked different now, more defined, more solid, less echo-like. And it studied him with a faint smile, saying, "You made it out. That's good. Not everyone does." And Jason stepped back because the ground under him pulsed again, rising slightly like the whole place was breathing slower now, and he said, "Where am I?" Which sounded like the dumbest possible question, but also the only one big enough for this moment. And his duplicate said softly, "In between. The place the bus brings the ones who don't choose fast enough." And Jason frowned. "Between what?" And the duplicate hesitated, eyes flickering like static, then answered, "Between your life and the version of it this place remembers." And Jason didn't know what that meant, didn't want to. But the second duplicate stepped off the bus next, The taller one, the one whose shadow had stretched toward the ceiling back in the motel. And this taller version looked even more wrong up close. Its limbs just a fraction too long, its smile too wide, like someone had zoomed in on a human and stretched all the important parts. And Jason froze as it walked toward him, moving with that loose, floating glide that made his stomach twist. And the first duplicate gently held up a hand and said, "Don't mind him. He's what this place made when it only half remembered you." And Jason whispered, "Great. Love that for me." And the taller version tilted its head like a curious dog, letting out a soft clicking noise from somewhere deep inside his throat. And before Jason could ask the 10,000 questions he absolutely needed to ask, a third shadow rose behind him, and Jason turned just in time to see the third duplicate step out from behind the bus, quiet, calm, and unsettlingly normal looking. Maybe too normal. The version of him that would blend into any crowd, slip through any conversation unnoticed. And this third one said softly, "We don't have much time." And the ground pulsed harder now, trembling like a warning. And Jason felt the air shift, the whispers growing sharper, clearer, forming almost words that sounded like his own voice echoing from far away, calling his name in tones that didn't match his mouth. And the first duplicate said, "The bus marked you. It doesn't want to let you go." And Jason snapped, "Let me go from what? I didn't ask to be here." And the normal-looking duplicate stepped closer, gently placing a cold hand on Jason's shoulder, saying, "You were supposed to be on that road. You were supposed to board that bus. This place didn't take you by accident." And Jason shook his head, backing away, voice shaking as he said, No, I missed my turn. There wasn't even supposed to be a bus stop there." And the normal duplicate's expression softened, almost pitying, as it said quietly, "That's the thing. You didn't miss anything. The turn was made for you. This whole route was." And as Jason stared at them, breath caught in his throat. The sky above them rippled, tearing open like fabric pulled from both ends, revealing an enormous glowing set of bus headlights far above, upside down, staring straight down at him like a predator peering into a trap. And a massive metallic groan echoed through the void as the headlights drifted lower. And Jason whispered, No more buses." But the ground beneath him cracked open, splitting like glass around a bullet hole, and the three duplicates stepped back, their shapes flickering like static. And the tallest one pointed upward with a slow, trembling finger as the upside-down bus began descending faster, the engine roaring like a living thing. And the first duplicate whispered, "Jason, you need to run." But it was already too late because the cracks widened, the ground gave way, and Jason fell straight through, down into a dark tunnel of rushing wind and ripping metal, just as a voice that sounded exactly like his own whispered from the darkness below, "Finally, you're right on time."